My credit score dropped 200 points overnight. I stared at the alert on my phone, my coffee growing cold in my hand. 200 points. I'm a senior financial analyst at Morrison Investment Group. I've spent the last 8 years helping clients protect their wealth, analyzing risk, spotting fraud. I know exactly what a drop like that means. But I didn't take out a loan. I didn't miss any payments. I haven't even used my credit cards in 3 months because I've been saving for a down payment on a condo in the Pearl District. My credit was perfect. 850. Pristine. I pulled up my credit monitoring app with shaking hands, scrolling past my 2 paid-off student loans, my car payment that I'd finished last year, my single credit card with a $1,200 limit that I kept for emergencies. Then I saw it. A new entry, flagged in red. Business loan. Amount: $480. $5,000. Opened 6 weeks ago. Already 30 days past due. $485,000. For a business I didn't own. A loan I never applied for. I need to back up. Before we go any further, you need to understand why this wasn't just shocking. It was a very specific kind of nightmare. The kind I thought I'd escaped 2 years ago. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I'm the oldest of 2 daughters. I grew up in a small house in southeast Portland with parents who immigrated from Mexico when I was 3. My dad worked construction. My mom cleaned houses. They were good people, hard-working people, but they never quite figured out money. Every Christmas was lean. Every unexpected expense was a crisis. I learned early that financial stability wasn't something you were born with. It was something you built, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I got a full scholarship to Portland State. I worked 2 jobs through college. I graduated with a degree in finance and a job offer at Morrison Investment Group before I even walked across the stage. By 25, I was making $75,000 a year. By 30, I'd doubled that. I was proud of what I'd built. My younger sister, Jessica, took a different path. She got pregnant at 21, married her boyfriend Mike a month later, and had another baby 2 years after that. Mike's a good guy, a genuinely good guy. He works as an electrician, makes decent money, but with 2 kids and a mortgage, things were always tight for them. And my parents? They moved in with Jess and Mike 5 years ago, after my dad's injury left him unable to work. They helped with the kids. Jess cooked for them. It seemed like it worked. One big happy family. Except I was always the one they called when money got tight. $500 here for car repairs. $1,000 there for medical bills. $2,000 for the kids' daycare when Mike's hours got cut. I said yes every time. I sent the money. I never asked for it back. That's what family does, right? You help each other. Then came the big one. 2 years ago, right before Thanksgiving, my mom called me crying. Jess was in the hospital. Something about complications from a procedure. They needed $30,000 the insurance wouldn't cover. $30,000. It would wipe out most of my savings, but it was Jess, my baby sister. Of course I'd help. I sent the money the same day. I told them not to worry about paying me back. Family takes care of family. 3 months later, I was at brunch with an old college friend when she pulled up her Instagram. There was Jess, tanned and smiling on a beach in Cancun with Mike and the kids, 7 days in Mexico. My $30,000. There had been no medical emergency, no hospital stay, no life-saving procedure. Just a very convenient lie that got them a family vacation they couldn't afford. I confronted them over Sunday dinner. My parents claimed they didn't know. Jess said it wasn't technically a lie because she'd been stressed and stress is a medical issue. And didn't I think her mental health was important? Mike couldn't look at me. He mumbled something about Jess really needing a break and he was going to pay me back once he got his tax refund. That was 2 years ago. I never saw a penny of that money. And I never loaned my family money again. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I kept my distance. I rebuilt my savings. I focused on my career. I started dating someone. I was healing. Until that credit alert. I pulled up the loan details. The lending bank was Pacific Northwest Commercial Credit, a business lender I'd actually analyzed for a client once. Reputable. They don't make mistakes like this. The loan was for a business called Jess's Kitchen PDX LLC, my sister's name. The registered agent was me. The guarantor was me. My social security number. My address. My income verification. My forged signature on every single document. I called the bank. I spent 40 minutes on hold before getting transferred to a loan officer named Brad, who sounded about 12 years old and extremely nervous when I explained the situation. He put me on hold again. 10 minutes later, a woman named Carol from their fraud department picked up. She had my file open. I could hear her typing. She asked me to verify my personal information. Then she asked if I'd co-signed a business loan for my sister 6 weeks ago. I said no. I said I'd never even heard of this business until 15 minutes ago. There was a long pause. She told me they'd received a complete application packet with my verified income statements, tax returns, and employment verification. Everything had checked out. My credit was excellent. The business plan was solid. A food truck specializing in authentic Mexican cuisine, starting with the Portland farmers markets and food truck pods. Startup costs, commercial kitchen lease, vehicle purchase, it all looked legitimate. Except I never signed anything. I never even knew Jess wanted to start a business. Carol said they'd open an investigation, but I needed to file a police report for identity theft and send them a copy. She said the loan was currently in default, which meant my credit would continue to take hits until this was resolved. She said it could take months, maybe longer. She was sorry. She kept saying she was sorry. I hung up and immediately called my boyfriend, David. He's an attorney, corporate law mostly, but he put me in touch with a friend who specializes in fraud cases. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she answered her cell on a Saturday afternoon because David told her it was urgent. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said 3 words that changed everything. You know what those 3 words were? Let me tell you. Call the police. Not talk to your family. Not maybe it's a misunderstanding. Just call the police. Because this wasn't a family squabble over borrowed money. This was identity theft. This was fraud. This was a federal crime. But I didn't call the police that night. I called my sister instead. I needed to hear her say it. I needed to understand how this happened. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Jess sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. She asked how I was, said the kids missed me, asked if I was coming to Thanksgiving dinner at Mom and Dad's. At our house, she corrected. Everything's at our house now. I asked her about the loan. There was a beat of silence. Then she laughed. This nervous little laugh that I remembered from when we were kids and she'd gotten caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. She said, yeah, okay, we need to talk about that. She said she and Mike had this amazing opportunity. A food truck business. She'd always been an incredible cook, everyone said so, and Portland's food truck scene was booming. They could make real money, build something for the kids, but they needed capital, and her credit was shot from some medical bills, and Mike's income alone wasn't enough to qualify for a business loan. So she used my information instead. She said it so casually, like it was obvious, like it made perfect sense. She said she'd known I'd never agree to co-sign after the vacation thing, even though that was totally different and she still didn't understand why I was so mad about that. So she'd just handled it herself. She had access to all my personal information anyway. We're sisters, and it's not like it was real debt. The business was going to make money. Mike would pay everything back. I wouldn't have to do anything. It was just to get the loan approved. I asked her if she understood what she'd done, if she understood that my credit score had dropped 200 points, if she understood that I was legally liable for nearly $500,000, if she understood the word fraud. She got defensive. She said I always acted like I was better than her just because I had some fancy job. She said family is supposed to help each other. She said when she needed $30,000 for her health, I gave it without question. So why was this different? She said the business just needed time to get going, and if I'd stop being so dramatic and just give them 6 months, they'd start making payments and everything would be fine. I told her I was filing a police report. She laughed again, but this time it was bitter. She said I wouldn't do that. She said I wouldn't send my own sister to jail. She said, what about Mom and Dad? What about her kids? She said I'd always been selfish, but this would be a new low even for me. Then she hung up. I sat in my apartment, this beautiful 1-bedroom in the Alberta Arts District that I'd worked so hard to afford, and I felt something crack open inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just this deep, clarifying certainty. My sister had stolen my identity. She'd forged my signature. She'd taken out nearly $500,000 in my name, and she felt entitled to do it. She felt like I owed her this. I called Patricia Chen back. I told her I was ready to file a police report, She said she'd meet me at the precinct first thing Monday morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I'd helped them, all the times I'd said yes, all the times I'd swallowed my resentment because that's what you do for family. And I thought about the future they'd stolen from me, the condo I was going to buy, the financial security I'd built, the trust I'd have to rebuild with lenders, with credit bureaus, with the world. Sunday morning, my phone started blowing up. My mom called 6 times. My dad texted, "We need to talk about this situation with Jessica. Family meeting today, 3 p.m. I didn't respond. I went for a run instead, pounding through the streets of my neighborhood, trying to outrun the rage that was finally catching up with me. At 2:45, David picked me up. I'd asked him to come with me to my parents' house. I needed a witness. I needed someone who wasn't going to let me be guilted into backing down. We pulled up to the house at 3 on the dot. It's a small craftsman in Montevilla that Jess and Mike bought 7 years ago, with help from an FHA loan. The yard was cluttered with kids' toys. Mike's work van was in the driveway. Through the window, I could see my mom setting the table. David squeezed my hand before we got out of the car. He reminded me that I was the victim here, that I'd done nothing wrong, that I had every right to protect myself. The door opened before we could knock. My mom stood there, her face already pinched with worry. She hugged me like nothing was wrong, then looked at David with confusion. I'd never brought a boyfriend to a family meeting before. This was family business. The living room felt smaller than I remembered. My dad sat in his recliner, the one Mike had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago. Jess was on the couch with Mike beside her, his hands clasped between his knees. The kids were at a neighbor's house. This was adult conversation only. My mom brought out coffee and pan dulce like this was a normal Sunday visit. Jess smiled at me, this tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said thanks for coming, like I'd had a choice. My dad cleared his throat. He's a man of few words, always has been. He said we had a situation that needed to be resolved as a family. He said Jess made a mistake, a big one. But mistakes happen. He said the important thing now was to figure out how to fix it without destroying the family. I asked him if he knew about the loan before it happened. He didn't answer directly. He said Jess had mentioned wanting to start a business. He said it seemed like a good opportunity. He said they'd needed a co-signer with better credit. So yes, he knew. They all knew. My mom jumped in. She said they'd thought about asking me directly, but they knew I'd say no after the misunderstanding about the vacation money. She actually called it a misunderstanding. She said they'd decided it would be easier to just handle it themselves. She said she'd provided some of the documentation, tax returns I'd left at their house years ago, old pay stubs I'd thrown away. They'd pieced together my financial life from my own trash. Jess said they'd been planning to tell me once the business got going and started making money. She said it would have been a nice surprise. Look what we built with your help. I asked Mike if he'd known. He finally looked at me. His face was gray. He said yes, he'd known, but it was Jess's idea and she'd insisted it would work and he'd just wanted to support his wife's dream. He said he was sorry. He actually sounded like he meant it. I told them I was filing a police report in the morning. The room went silent. Then everyone started talking at once. My mom said I couldn't be serious. My dad said family doesn't call the police on family. Jess said I was being vindictive and cruel. She said this was about the vacation money, wasn't it? I'd never forgiven her for that, and now I was using this as an excuse to punish her. I stood up. David stood with me. I said this wasn't about punishment. This was about fraud, identity theft, nearly $500,000 in debt that I didn't consent to. I said my credit was destroyed, my financial future was compromised, and they'd all participated in it. My mom started crying. She said I was going to tear the family apart. She said, what about Thanksgiving? What about Christmas? What about the kids? I looked at Jess. I asked her if she had any idea what she'd actually done. If she understood that I'd spent 8 years building a career, building financial security, building a life, and she'd stolen it from me because she felt entitled to it. She stood up too, her face flushed. She said everything was always about me, wasn't it? She said I'd gotten the scholarship, the good job, the perfect life, while she'd had to struggle with 2 kids and a husband who worked 60 hours a week just to make ends meet. She said I'd never helped them. Not really. I'd just thrown money at them to make myself feel better. She said if I actually cared about family, I'd let this go. I'd give them time to make it right. I asked her how. How exactly would they make it right? The business was already in default. They'd missed the first payment. How were they going to pay back $485,000? Mike finally spoke up. He said they'd gotten off to a rough start. The food truck they'd bought needed more repairs than expected. The permits were more expensive than they'd budgeted. They'd thought they'd be up and running by September, but it was already November and they were still working through paperwork. But they had a plan. They were going to launch by spring. They'd make money. They'd make payments. They just needed time. I told them time was what I didn't have. My credit score was dropping every day. I was liable for the debt. If they didn't pay, I'd be the one collectors came after. I'd be the one sued. I'd be the one with a judgment on my record. Patricia Chen had explained all of this to me. She'd explained that I had two options. I could try to resolve this privately, have them refinance the loan in their own names, get my name removed, repair my credit slowly. But that assumed they could actually qualify for a loan without my forged credentials. And given that they'd needed to commit fraud to get it in the first place, that seemed unlikely. Or I could file a police report, press charges, and let the legal system sort it out. It would be messy. It would be public. But it would definitively prove that I was a victim of fraud, and it would give me the documentation I needed to clear my credit. My mom begged me to choose option one. She said we could work it out as a family. She said they'd refinance. She said Mike would take on extra work. She said I just had to give them a chance. I looked at Mike. I asked him directly if he thought they could qualify for a $485,000 business loan based on his income alone, with no fraud, no false documentation, no stolen identity. He looked at Jess. Then he looked at the floor. He said probably not. That's when I knew. They had no plan. They had no way to fix this. They'd committed fraud. And now they expected me to just live with the consequences because we were family. I told them I was filing the report. I told them they'd be hearing from my attorney. I told them I was done. My dad stood up. He said if I did this, I was no longer welcome in his home. He said I'd be choosing to destroy this family. He said I'd have to live with that choice. I said I could live with it. I'd been living without them just fine for 2 years. This just made it official. David and I left. My mom was still crying. Jess was yelling something about how I'd always been selfish, how I'd always thought I was too good for them. I didn't look back. Monday morning, 9 a.m., I met Patricia at the North Precinct. I filed a police report for identity theft and fraud. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but clear about what came next. There would be an investigation. Given the amount of money involved and the clear evidence of fraud, charges would likely be filed. It could take months to resolve. I'd need to cooperate fully with both the criminal investigation and the bank's investigation. Patricia helped me file disputes with all 3 credit bureaus. She helped me put a freeze on my credit. She helped me draft a letter to Pacific Northwest Commercial Credit explaining the situation and demanding they remove me from the loan immediately. The bank's response came 3 days later. They'd confirmed that my signature on the loan documents didn't match the signature on file from my actual accounts with other institutions. They'd confirmed that I'd never contacted them or visited their offices. They'd confirmed that the income verification documents had been fabricated. They were cooperating with the police investigation. But removing me from the loan would require a court order, which meant I'd have to sue them. Add that to the list. 2 weeks later, the police contacted me. They'd interviewed Jess, Mike, and my parents. Jess had initially denied everything, then admitted to using some of my information but claimed I'd given her permission. My mom corroborated this story. My dad said he didn't remember the details. Mike told the truth. He said Jess had forged everything, that my parents had helped gather documents, that I'd never known or consented to any of it. The detective asked if I was sure I wanted to press charges. She said fraud cases involving family members were complicated. She said even if Jess was convicted, I'd still have to deal with the civil side of things, the debt, the credit damage. She said it might be easier to just work it out privately. I said I was sure. I said I wanted to press charges. 3 days before Thanksgiving, the district attorney's office filed charges against Jessica Rodriguez. Identity theft, forgery, fraud, 3 felony counts. If convicted, she could face up to 10 years in prison. Realistically, as a first-time offender with 2 young kids, she'd probably get probation and restitution. But the criminal record would follow her forever. My mom called me 27 times that day. I didn't answer. She left voicemails ranging from begging to rage. How could I do this? How could I send my own sister to jail? What about the kids? What would people say? We'd never be able to hold our heads up in the community again. I was a disgrace to the family. Jess called from a different number. She said I'd won. She said I'd destroyed her life. Was that enough? She said she'd probably lose her kids now. She said Mike was talking about divorce. She said she hoped I was happy. I wasn't happy. I was exhausted. But I was sure. The legal process ground forward slowly. Jess hired a public defender who tried to negotiate a plea deal. Patricia represented me in the civil case against the bank. David held my hand through all of it, and never once suggested I should just let it go for the sake of family peace. December brought the first court hearing. I saw Jess in the hallway outside the courtroom. She'd lost weight. She looked older. She didn't acknowledge me. My parents were there, sitting on her side of the room. They didn't acknowledge me either. The judge reviewed the evidence. The forged signatures, the stolen documents, the fake income verification. Mike testified. He explained how Jess had convinced him it was fine, that families helped each other, that I'd never have to know. He explained how he'd started to have doubts as the bills piled up and they realized they couldn't make the payments. He explained how Jess had insisted they just needed more time. The prosecutor asked him if I'd ever given permission for any of this. He said no. Absolutely not. Jess's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who'd held a grudge over a family vacation and was now using the legal system to punish her sister. Patricia shut that down fast. She presented my financial records showing 8 years of loans to my family, money I'd never asked to be repaid, help I'd given freely until they'd crossed the line from asking to stealing. The judge wasn't sympathetic to Jess. She called it a clear case of identity theft and fraud motivated by entitlement. She said it was particularly egregious because Jess had used her position as a family member to access personal information. She accepted the plea deal. 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory restitution to both me and the bank, and a permanent felony on her record. In the hallway after, my mom tried to approach me. I walked past her. My dad called after me, said we needed to talk about how to move forward. I kept walking. January brought the resolution with the bank. They agreed to remove me from the loan and discharge my liability in exchange for dropping my lawsuit against them. My credit report would be corrected. It would take time for my score to recover, but I'd be clean. The debt was now entirely Jess and Mike's problem, except they couldn't pay it. Of course they couldn't. Mike's income alone wasn't enough to cover a $485,000 business loan, plus their regular mortgage and living expenses. The bank started foreclosure proceedings on their house. My parents would have to move out, find somewhere else to live, figure out retirement without the financial cushion of living with Jess rent-free. I didn't feel bad about this. I know I was supposed to. I know there are people who'd say I should have just let it go, should have protected my family, should have found another way. But they'd made their choices. They'd chosen to participate in fraud. They'd chosen to prioritize Jess's business dream over my financial security. They'd chosen to see me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. I made my choice too. February brought the divorce papers. Mike filed for divorce and full custody of the kids. His lawyer argued that Jess had demonstrated poor judgment, criminal behavior, and financial irresponsibility. The court agreed. Mike got the kids. Jess got supervised visitation and a mandate to complete a financial literacy course and attend therapy. I heard all of this through the legal grapevine, through Patricia, who stayed in touch with Mike's attorney. I never talked to any of them directly. March brought a letter. It came to my apartment in a pink envelope addressed in Jess's handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. It was an apology. Sort of. She said she was sorry for what she'd done. She said therapy was helping her understand that she'd been wrong. She said she'd been jealous of me for years. Jealous of my success, my freedom, my money. She said she'd convinced herself that I owed her something, that my success had somehow come at the expense of her struggles. She said she saw now that wasn't true. She said she hoped someday I could forgive her, but she understood if I couldn't. I put the letter in a drawer and forgot about it. April brought spring, and with it, a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in months. My credit score was climbing back up. I'd been approved for a mortgage pre-qualification. I started looking at condos again. David asked me to move in with him instead. His place in the Northwest District, 3 bedrooms, river views. We could save up for a house together. Build something together. I said yes. May brought a chance encounter at the farmer's market. I was picking up vegetables when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Mike standing there with both kids, a shopping bag in one hand and his son's hand in the other. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then he said he was glad he'd run into me. He said he'd wanted to reach out but didn't know if I'd want to hear from him. He said he wanted to thank me. I asked him what he was thanking me for. For destroying his marriage? For putting his wife in the criminal justice system? He said no, for stopping it before it got worse. He said Jess was getting help. Real help. The court-ordered therapy had evolved into actual treatment for some underlying issues she'd been avoiding for years. Control issues. Entitlement. She was learning to take responsibility. He didn't know if they'd ever reconcile. Probably not. But he was glad she was getting help. And he was grateful that I'd drawn the line. Because if I hadn't, she would have just kept going. The fraud would have gotten bigger. The consequences worse. He said he was sorry for his part in it. He said he should have stopped her. He said he'd let his fear of conflict override his moral compass, and that was on him. I told him I appreciated him telling the truth in court. I told him I hoped he and the kids were okay. He said they were. They would be. That night, David asked me if I thought I'd ever talk to my family again. I said I didn't know. Maybe someday. But not soon. I said I needed to build a life that felt safe first. A life where people respected my boundaries. A life where love wasn't conditional on what I could provide. He understood. It's been 14 months now since that credit alert. 14 months since I discovered that my sister had stolen my identity and nearly $500,000. 14 months of police reports and court hearings and credit disputes and therapy sessions of my own. My credit score is back up to 795. I'm closing on a condo next month. A beautiful 2-bedroom in the Pearl with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. David and I are getting married in September. Small ceremony, just close friends. My parents aren't invited. Neither is Jess. I don't feel guilty about that anymore. I did at first. The cultural weight of family, of obligation, of loyalty. It was heavy. But somewhere along the way, I realized that family has to be mutual. It has to be built on respect and honesty and genuine care. What my family wanted from me wasn't love. It was utility. They wanted me to be a bank, an insurance policy, a safety net, but never just me. So I built a new family. David, who stood by me when things got ugly. Patricia, who fought for me when I was too exhausted to fight for myself. My coworkers who covered for me during the worst of the legal proceedings. My friends who let me cry and rage and process without judgment. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't filed that police report. If I'd chosen the path of least resistance, tried to handle it privately, protected Jess from consequences, I'd probably still be drowning in debt. My credit would still be destroyed. And they'd probably ask me for help again, and again, because I'd have proven that there were no real boundaries, no real consequences. I made the right choice. I know that now. It wasn't the easy choice. It wasn't the choice that kept everyone comfortable. But it was the choice that honored my own worth, my own years of work, my own right to a future that wasn't dictated by other people's sense of entitlement. Last week, I got another letter from Jess. I haven't opened it. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. But I don't owe her my forgiveness just because we share DNA. I don't owe my parents a relationship just because they raised me. I don't owe anyone access to my life if they've proven they'll use that access to hurt me. The obligation is over. The debt is settled. Not the financial debt. That's still being paid off by Jess and Mike and will be for years. But the emotional debt, the weight of family duty, the guilt of saying no, that's done. I'm free now. And that freedom is worth every uncomfortable conversation, every severed relationship, every accusation of being heartless or selfish or cold. Because I'm not heartless. I'm just done letting my heart be used against me. That's my story. That's how I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to let go of people who refuse to love you back the right way. And if you're watching this, if you're in a similar situation, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone your destruction. You don't owe anyone your financial security. You don't owe anyone access to your identity, your credit, your future. Family is supposed to protect you, not exploit you. And if they can't do that, then it's okay to protect yourself, even if that means walking away, even if that means pressing charges, even if that means being the bad guy in someone else's story. Because in your story, you get to be the one who survives. You get to be the one who thrives. You get to be free.